most people are not eating enough protein. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. Today's topic is really diving into a common challenge when anybody is kind of going along their fitness journey, and that is eating enough protein.
This is probably the most common. Like the first week, I even tell people ahead of time, I'm like, listen, you're probably the first 3 days, you're going to shoot me a message, be like, I can't hit my protein numbers. It's so common when you're chasing body composition related fitness goals.
Yeah. Protein is an interesting one because I think everybody has somehow come to some conclusion that protein is important. We don't always know why or how much or what for, but I think the social narrative right now in fitness is like, get your protein in. And for good reasons. We're going to save those reasons for a future podcast where we explore the role of protein. We actually did talk specifically about the role of each macro, including protein, in a past podcast episode, which I will link here in the YouTube cards if you're watching on YouTube, and also in the description below. So you can check that one out. But today we want to really tackle protein sufficiency and make it very practical. We want to talk explicitly about how you can increase your protein numbers. We all know it's important. We're still not getting enough.
If you have never tracked your protein intake, you don't really know where you're falling. That's the thing, right? You might say, oh, I subjectively feel like I eat protein. But usually, even if you think that, when you go and actually do the first time tracking like a full day of eating, you're like, I'm really not. Like we even had one of our client, Paul, has told me this like 4 times. He's like, oh yeah, I'm totally eating protein. Then when we first started working together, he's like, I was eating like 60 grams of protein a day, and I had no idea.
Yeah, somebody actually asked me recently, like, I met someone new, they found out what I did, nutrition coaching, and they're like, what's the number one myth that people have in mind? And I was like, it's not necessarily a myth, but the number one thing or misconception people have is that they're eating enough protein when they're not. And that was my response. I was like, it's just people really underestimate their own protein intake. And I actually went into some research today because I wanted to anchor this conversation. And like, it's not just a subjective thought of like, we're not eating enough protein. I looked at dietary numbers in Canada and the US. So we're talking North American population here. Just to understand, are people eating enough protein? It is true. People don't eat enough protein. What's really interesting is that there is a difference between like recommended amount of protein to intake and then optimal. And on the optimal side, it gets higher if you are, let's say, like a leaner individual maybe, or you are an athlete of any sort. But we're not going to talk about optimal. We're going to just talk about the recommended daily. And it's interesting because there is this measure that is called the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. And what that represents is essentially what percentage of your daily calories, quote unquote, should be coming from each macro. And the guidelines around protein are that 10 to 35% of your daily calories should be coming from protein.
Interesting.
Which is interesting, right? Because my first thought was, that's a huge range.
It's a huge range.
It's a huge range. And I like that it's a percentage because it helps contextualize, to different calorie intakes because everybody's calorie intake is going to be different. So it's not just like hit this amount. But eating 35% of your calories from protein is very different than eating 10%.
Yeah, and also because calorie needs differ so greatly. That's why I don't like some things that are super sciencey, because we like to set protein intake by like gram based on usually body weight and lean mass comparisons, not based on percentage. But it's like, I get why they did it for the purpose of the study, but it's like, it's flawed for a number of reasons. Yeah,
it is. And I think what was really interesting is like, there is still a difference between that and the recommended daily amount. So what we see is like the RDA on like, nutrition facts packaging and stuff, that RDA is probably much more problematic because the RDA is based on 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that would probably be roughly, I'm trying to do some quick mental math, let's say 0.4-ish grams per pound of body weight, which we know is actually really far below the recommended minimum of 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, right? And the reason for that, and I think this is the context people need to understand, the recommended daily amount is based on preventing malnutrition.
Yes.
It's not based
Very
on
important. Optimizing for muscle growth, strength, and fat loss. Yeah.
Right. And even if you're not trying to grow a ton of muscle, you want to be better than just bare minimum, right? Because there's a lot of other functions protein plays in the body.
if you're training regularly, like your rate of protein turnover is way higher. Like your protein needs will be higher. And like if you are serious about fat loss, muscle growth, or strength, or just training regularly and focus on recovery, like the RDA is like scraping the barrel. It's just pretty much like, what do we need to survive without any issues with health? It's like, okay, as a general person who's probably not even training, so
Right.
don't look at the RDA.
So first step is, if you think I'm getting enough protein because I'm hitting the RDA minimum, reevaluate. Next step is go into that, what do we call it? The AMDR, the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. And that's 10 to 35% of your calories. One step up, if you're falling within that range, interesting. You're doing better. But again, like we said, that range is super, super broad. And I'm not going to talk about individualized needs and stuff like that, but just to paint a picture kind of population wide, I looked at a couple studies. One looked at Canada. So in Canada, the percentage of daily calories from protein among adults, this is around 2015. So it's still about 10 years ago, but it's our closest or most recent assessment. The percentage of daily calories from protein was about 17% on average. So if you think about that range of 10 to 35%, it's still on the lower end. There is still room for improvement, absolutely. And that's an average. Same thing kind of if we look at the US. So there was a 2018 study that looked at long-term, 2001 to 2014, and found the same thing. Most adults are in that 16% of their intake coming from protein. So when you look at the data from like a government statistics perspective, a lot of the research I was finding is like, yeah, people are eating enough protein, check mark, because they're falling within that 10 to 35% range, the 16, 17% numbers. But again, we're really far from that upper threshold. So it is skewed towards the lower threshold. And two, as you kindly pointed out, if you are somebody who has specific training goals or even any sort of athletic endeavors, you need more.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast, don't follow that recommendation of what anything they say for the government. No offense, we'll remove all liability on what I'm saying, but it's just like if you want to be just like checking a box of like average, but anybody who's listening to the podcast doesn't just want like an okay physique. They're focused on progressing with their physique in one way, shape, or form, or just like getting more into training and nutrition. So again, I don't like setting protein based on percentages for a variety of reasons. And B, it's like, let's not just check the box based on RDA. Let's find, okay, how do we hit higher protein levels for like somebody of our, seriousness in regards to fitness.
Exactly. So the TLDR of me going through that research rampage was really just to point out that it is true. Most people are not eating enough protein. And when the government tells us that we are, there is still room for improvement. We're doing a great job hitting the bare minimums. That's a fact. But we can do much, much better. And so for all of you guys who are listening, wondering, how can I do better? How can I actually start eating more protein? That is exactly what we are going to talk about. Any final assessments on why we're not eating enough protein before we dive into the practical stuff?
As you said, it's hyped up for a good reason, and people are like, yeah, protein, but like, do a few days of actually accurately tracking how much protein you're having, and you will see you're not having as much as you think you are. And I think it's just because most people, like growing up habitually, unless you grow up as like with a bodybuilding parent or something like that, like the snack is not going to be like, let's have some protein oats. It's going to be, here's, these crackers, or I don't know, some fruit here, or like these chips as a snack, or I don't know, this peanut butter jelly sandwich, which tend to be low protein meals. So just habitually, like our habits from growing up typically are not skewed towards a high protein intake.
And that's just the North American diet in general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
I think other places in the world, it does look a little bit different, but we aren't necessarily naturally gravitating towards food choices that make protein sufficiency easy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think what you said there, I want to harp on a little bit, is tracking your protein is kind of the first step. And we're not saying it as in like, you need to diligently hit these numbers. It's tracking your protein as an educational tool.
Yes.
Because most people don't realize how much protein they're actually eating. And so it can be a really, really eye-opening experience when you actually, I'm going to say put pen to paper, but we all know they're actually just apps. So it's put thumb to screen. Yeah, I don't know. And start quantifying it just to help you understand, okay, am I getting enough protein? Mm-hmm. If not, what are the gaps I need to close to get my protein up? So that is really, really important, is using that tool, tracking, as an educational tool. Let's dive into the practical stuff.
Yeah. So let's say you did track and you're like, Paris and Courtney, wow, I am eating like not enough protein. Because if we just say, okay, like general recommendation for fitness focused people want to be somewhere around, let's say 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, context and nuances integrated somewhere within there. But if you're in the range, you're like, wow, I'm way outside that range, right? Like multiply your body weight by 0.7, that's the low end. Multiply your body weight by 1.2, that's like you're probably more than covered if you're up there. Go ahead.
Small caveat, because you said there's a lot of nuance. I'm going to just bring forward one piece of nuance is if you are carrying more body fat, probably think about the lower range because,
yes,
your body weight is going to be higher. You don't need to be maybe eating, let's say 250 grams of protein. If you are leaner, maybe think about the higher end.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that in the macronutrients episode. We go more deep dive, so we're not going to cover that in this one. But yeah, that was a good episode. I would like if I recommend one educational episode, it would be
that one. Yeah, what do you need to know about macros? I think it was, and why they matter. So again, links are in the description below for you to tune into that one. Today we are focusing more on the practical side of how you can get your protein numbers up.
Yeah. So if you are low on protein, it either means we need to increase the current serving sizes of protein sources that we're already eating. So therefore, we must then know what protein sources are, what has a lot of protein in it. Like that's a prerequisite for fixing the first one is we need to increase the current portions of the protein servings we're already having during the day, and or we need to add additional serving or additional servings of protein throughout the day. It's going to be one and or the other one, logically speaking.
I'm just going to, before we actually break that down further, say, again, that's why the tracking is important, because you can look at, okay, which foods are currently giving me protein? Is it realistic for me to eat more of those foods in a meal or in a snack? So let's say you're already eating, chicken for dinner. Can you eat more chicken? And that's the easiest way. So to your point, increasing the serving size of what you're already eating. The flip side is if you're like, I don't think I could stomach more chicken in this dinner, then you consider increasing the number of servings across your day.
Because if we look at even some newer data that came out, like total daily protein intake is the most important. We don't need to bog down in details. If you're eating, let's say, more than 2 servings per day and hitting your total daily protein target, like you're pretty much have your bases covered. For the most part, right? But it's very practical to look at, okay, what foods give me high protein compared to the amount of calories? Like what's the highest ratio of protein compared to the other macros in these food groups? And I need either increase the current serving size I already have of those, or add additional servings of that to my day to hit my protein numbers. That's how you increase your protein intake.
Exactly. So let's now dive into, we've got 5 specific methods outlined to help you do exactly that, increase your protein intake. Some of these are oriented around, increasing the serving sizes of what you're eating, and some of them are oriented around the second strategy of increasing the number of servings. So the first one here is leading with a protein source when you're designing any meal. So lead with protein is something I think I say in probably a good 50 to 60% of my client check-ins. Lead with protein.
That's a good one. I like that. I'm going to use it.
Yeah. Because when you're planning a meal, and it doesn't matter if you've meal prepped this meal in advance or if you are spontaneously being like, what am I going to have for dinner in the next 5 minutes? Your thought should be, how am I leading with protein? Like, what is the protein source that I'm building the meal around?
I like that. Like protein as the foundation and then build outwards. Yeah, that's a great one.
Exactly. And sometimes that could be like, okay, I keep going back to chicken, but there's obviously other protein sources. I'm going to throw some chicken breast on the barbecue, and then I'm going to add, a potato and some broccoli. But it could also be like, hey, I'm making a chili. Okay, ground turkey is going to be my protein source in there. Great. Now I'll just throw in some tomato sauce, veggies, whatever. So it doesn't necessarily matter what that meal is. It's just thinking with protein, is there a protein source in there? So strategy number 2 is pairing protein sources together. And I think this is actually incredibly helpful, especially for people who are on a vegetarian or plant-based diet, because a lot of times the natural amount of protein in their go-to sources is lower. So pairing different sources together can be really helpful. Let's say, you're making eggs and you're like, okay, I'm going to have eggs. More often than not, eating 2-3 eggs, actually not more often than not, just it's not enough protein for a full serving. 2 eggs is going to give you 12 grams protein, 3 is going to give you 18. So one of the things you might consider doing is, okay, if I'm having that for breakfast, maybe I'll add some Greek yogurt on the side. And now I've got a more full amount of protein because I've chosen 2 protein sources and paired them together.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's good. Or add a little bit of egg whites in there, or add a smoothie on the side, like protein smoothie. Like there's a lot of ways. If because also if the protein source you're choosing are higher in fat, for example, like the eggs, like you're getting 6 grams of protein per, but you're also getting 5 grams of fat. So if you want to hit more protein, but not like blow over your calories for on breakfast, then it's like, okay, how can we add an additional better protein to calorie ratio
Mm-hmm.
option? Let's say.
Right, exactly. And, sometimes there's certain other foods that are more protein and carbs instead of protein and fats. So now you're pairing two foods together that the protein is the overlapping part, but then you're also getting separate carbs and fats. An example of that would be like halloumi and chickpeas. That's one of my go-tos, right? Because I'm going to get a lot of fat from the halloumi. So if I keep eating more halloumi, it does add up a lot in calories, but I love halloumi. So then I pair it with chickpeas. Now I'm getting a little bit more protein, but I'm getting more carbs as well,
Yep.
instead of just adding on more fats.
I like it. I like it.
Cool. Okay, strategy number 3. I call these protein boosts. And I'm not sure if you want to top up on this, but I'm going to start.
Yeah.
So protein boost is like the things that you can do to incrementally add protein into your day. Because maybe the gap you have to close across a day is like 20 grams of protein. You don't necessarily need to have a full meal to get those extra 20 grams across the course of your day. You can think about adding little bits to the things you're already doing. So some of my go-tos for this. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if you're having 4 meals and you're falling 20 grams of protein short on your goal, that's only 5 more grams of protein per meal. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's a great way to contextualize it, and it makes it feel so much more accessible. You're like, oh, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so these protein boosts can be something like adding light cheese. Let's go back to our eggs. Okay, light shredded cheese. You can easily get 9 grams of protein and 5 grams of fat from 30 grams of light shredded cheese, right? So now all of a sudden you've just boosted a little bit. Or the other example is powdered peanut butter. That's a staple for me. I throw a little bit of that into my Greek yogurt, and now I've gotten a few more grams of protein there. I don't know if you have any other go-tos for just protein boosts.
It might kind of be a different kind of a way of thinking about it, but even like when I make pancakes for Tara, I'll put half a scoop of whey in there. It adds flavor, but it doesn't really change anything. It's just adding a little bit more protein to a meal, and it doesn't make a difference with the pancakes. Like, she won't even notice if I put it in it, or if I didn't. She asked me to put it in, by the way. But
I was gonna say, is this some secret reveal that Tara's been eating protein pancakes the whole time and didn't even know it?
She likes them. It's fun. I never control my girlfriend's nutrition intake. I'll say that out loud because sometimes she'll joke in social settings of like, yeah, if Tara lets me eat this, and as like a joke, and like I'm like, Tara, you can't say that, because like people are gonna think you're being serious. But I handle her programming, but I definitely do not make any comments or any control over her nutrition.
You handle her training programming.
Yes, training programming. I just write her workouts. That's it, and there's no control over it. So, anyways, something like that. Or what I do is I'll take the same 15 grams of whey and I'll put the tiniest bit of water and mix it into like a drizzle, and then it'll be a chocolate drizzle on top. And she said it tastes like pretty much like dessert.
It's like chocolate syrup.
It's pretty much like a chocolate syrup on your pancakes. So you can do half the scoop in the pancakes and half as a chocolate drizzle. Another thing that I'll do is, like, let's say you wanted sour cream with your wrap or something, just put a thing of Greek yogurt on the side. So it's not like a full serving Greek yogurt, but it will give you an extra maybe 10, 15 grams of protein in there. And now instead of having sour cream. So like little creative things like that people don't think about.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a full meal. It doesn't have to be like a big serving of a protein source. It's just those little bumps that, like you said, if you add an extra 5 grams across 4 meals a day, there's 20 grams of protein right there that you just found, right? So that was strategy number 3, was our protein boosts. Strategy number 4 now is strategic protein-based snacking. Because I think a lot of people sometimes be like, I just can't eat more at a meal. Like, I mean, that's not me. I can eat forever at a meal.
Never had that problem.
Yeah, but I can understand that some people do feel that way, right? But also, people just love to snack. And snacking isn't inherently bad. Like, that's a whole tangent for another day. But you can strategically add protein into your snacks, and then it reduces the need to increase the size of your meals. Do you have any go-to examples of that?
Jerky is a great one. You can get some pretty low cal jerky, which is a snack. Or nowadays we're so blessed with the amount of protein based snacks that you can find at the store, right? Like they make protein. There's protein chips now by Quest and stuff like that. Like maybe they're not like exactly chips, but they're pretty good. So you can find just about protein anything nowadays. But those aside, like Greek yogurt bowls or just like any bowl like that, a little smoothie here and there, or those like prepackaged protein shakes that taste good, like Premier Protein or something like that. Like Yeah, those kind of little snacks are. I don't know. I'm running out of you know.
I got a bunch of ideas. Hit
Yeah,
me
you
up.
go.
Um, one that I love is actually like they're like roasted chickpeas or roasted fava beans or
Mm,
just like dried broad beans, even for anyone who knows what that is. But they're like flavored and so they're crunchy and they're like salty. And I just think they're amazing. So adding some of those in there, right? So I think it also depends with like if you're somebody who likes salty versus sweet, there's a whole different lineup in terms of what to add in terms of protein snacking. Most people probably think protein bars if you're on the go. There's also a different lineup for protein snacks if you're at home versus on the go. But I think just thinking about, hey, is there a way for me to naturally find protein through a snack instead of having to depend exclusively on meals?
yeah, like even Steve, shout out Steve, he made protein Rice Krispie squares. And he
Yeah.
let me try them, and they taste like Rice Krispie squares, but they got like 15 grams of protein per. So you have two of those bad boys, and all of a sudden you got 30 grams of protein as a snack. So I was like kind of fading away during one of our workouts, and he's like out of his gym bag, he's like, oh, it's like the protein Rice Krispies. It is like the perfect blood glucose hit, and we finished off the session.
Oh my god. Now I just am craving Rice Krispie squares.
Yeah, I asked Steve to make some more,
Yeah,
but
Steve, if you're listening, I'm gonna come find you. Don't worry, we won't go that far. Know that there is demand for your protein Rice Krispies. Okay, that was strategy number 4. Number 5 is having, I'm going to call them backup convenient protein sources. Because I think we've all been there where we get to the end of the day where we're like, darn, I'm just a little bit behind on my protein. And kind of knowing what are those backup options that you can just grab and have. And sometimes it's overlaps with the snacks, but sometimes it's not. And so I think like just knowing those convenient sources, we don't have to think of like protein only coming from like your big batched meal prep of like chicken breast or like I've cooked all this salmon for the week. It doesn't have to be those things. There are some convenient go-tos. So for me, one thing I always have in my pantry is canned tuna. Doesn't go bad. It's easy to throw together into anything. But there's other options like rotisserie chicken that you can just pick up on your way home. You don't have to cook it, it's ready for you. Or things like Fairlife milk or other ultra filtered milks, where a glass of that can give you 16, 18 grams of protein easily. So if it's nighttime and you're getting ready for bed, that's simple, easy, doesn't require a lot of appetite. Anything else that would be like a convenient, let's say a convenient backup option.
yeah, I call them like my emergency cans of tuna that I always have in the cupboard no matter what.
Yeah.
But I think those are some good ones. Or again, like those little protein prepackaged protein shakes if you just have those in your fridge. But also sliced turkey breast, very easy, like okay, nighttime snack type situation. So yeah, just having those emergency ones, but also I find having some in the freezer because let's say you're on that, oh shoot, I'm running out of groceries situation. Just having some in the freezer always, even if it's like fish that you cooked and you just froze, or some sort of meat that you just cooked and you just froze it. Those are always options. A lot of fish you can, even if they're not cooked, you can cook them from being frozen. So it's like, oh shoot, don't have it. All right, let me take a couple things I had it, put it in the oven, and we're good to go. Type situations.
No, I think that's great. So there's like kind of like backup options for, okay, I need a backup for a meal.
Mhm.
The freezer is an excellent source of that, or like the canned tuna. And then there's backup options that's like, okay, let's say I'm running out at the end of the day. Cool, I just need a little bit more. Grab one of those pre-mixed shakes, grab a little bit of Fairlife milk, grab some sliced turkey, pop it on a rice cake or some crackers, sliced toast, and you're good to go. Amazing. Okay, so those were our initial 5 core strategies that we outlined for increasing your protein intake. Do you have any other ones that have come to mind since we've been chatting that you want to throw out there, or are we comfortable with those 5 for today?
I like it. The only thing I'll say, which kind of adds to a point I said before, was it's very easy to logically think about how to hit your protein. If you think about what's my total protein, how many meals and snacks combined am I going to have? So how many times am I going to eat during the day? And if I were, how many grams do I then need per meal? So let's say I'm eating 5 times a day. My protein intake is 200 as
Mm-hmm.
my target. Then I need 40 grams per meal.
Yeah,
So it's
break it
just like
down.
logic your way through it instead of, oh my gosh, I got to hit 200. It's like, okay, let's break it down. And
And I
it's,
think that's part of the benefit of using that tracking tool for education is like learning the quantities, and it allows you to take out the guesswork of like, oh my god, I don't even know if I'm getting enough protein. I don't even know if eating this thing's going to help me close the gaps. I'm just not sure. All of a sudden now quantifying it makes it feel a lot more tangible, and then you can logic your way through it, as you said.
I like it.
Fantastic. Okay, so one mindset detail that I do want to leave off today. Protein is one of those great things in the world of nutrition that allows us to really think about an abundance mindset. And, speaking as a millennial woman, where a lot of the diet and nutrition advice for my entire upbringing, my adolescence, was always restriction. Protein is such a great area of focus to really break through that sense of restriction and adopt an abundance mindset around food. It's a core way that we can think about the add not subtract philosophy, and how, adding more to the food that we eat can really be productive. So if you are struggling with any sort of like restrictive tendencies with your diet or with nutrition, then thinking about protein and the abundance of protein and the need for more protein can be a really productive way to help break through that thought process.
Definitely. And you'll find when you increase your protein, you'll be more full, which you talk about in another podcast, which means you end up eating less overall and without trying to eat less. Like, you're not in a restrictive mindset. You're in an I want to eat more mindset, but you end up also, if you're like, subconsciously typically controlling your calories as well, just because it's more filling. If you
it might just lead you to be more balanced.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you might feel like your hunger cues are more regulated.
Yeah.
You
less
might feel like
overconsume.
Yes, you're more satisfied after meals. Your snacking feels more purposeful or intentional. All of those things.
Yeah. Cool. I like Amazing. This combo. This is good.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I hope we did a good job today in articulating essentially why just following the RDA sometimes isn't enough, the fact that most people don't eat enough protein, and then we dove into a few practical strategies to help you close those gaps and start getting more protein into your diet. If you have any particular ways in which you get your protein in, any tips and tricks that you find helpful, drop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear them, and we'd love to share them with our community too, so that everybody can benefit from your experience and your learnings. Alrighty, so without further ado, we will leave you for this week, and we will be back in your feeds next Monday with another episode of Truth Talks. In the meantime, have an awesome week. Bye for now.
See you later.